Probably some artists shouldn't speak, but you don't know who that is until they start, really. If you've been to a talk of mine before, you probably know I begin most of these with a little anecdote so I get a sense of you. And so I just did it in Milan, I don't know, less than a week ago. But was anybody in Milan? We're safe. I had a show in Hamburg, and after there was a party in my honor at a big house. And it was one of those parties where I had to dance with the wife of the Burgermeister, Syndico, and etc. So it was work. And so I kind of escaped and went into a back room where nobody could find me to get a break. You know? At a certain moment, a man walked in with white hair like this. I walked up and he said, "You're the artist, Joseph Kosuth?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, I heard that you collect jokes, and I thought you might like to know the joke of my uncle Albert." And he was the nephew of Albert Einstein. And I said, "Absolutely. So this is the favorite joke of Albert Einstein. It's a conversation between man and God. Man said to God, 'Well, listen, God, for you, what is 100 billion years?' God said to man, 'Well, for me, it's only a second.' And man said, 'Wow, it's amazing.' He said, well, listen, for you, what's $100 billion? And God said, 'Oh, for me, it's just a penny.' And man said, 'Well, God, can I have that penny?' And God said, 'Sure, just a second.'" You got to do better. All right, well, I will thank you in advance for your patience. If you run out, leave as quietly as possible. Creating relations, architecture, public work, and cultural installations. Curated installations. It's very important to understand how architecture is the most psychological of all of the art forms. When we enter into old architectural spaces, we experience the worldview of that particular historical moment. We enter into the psychology of how people lived during a certain time period. It is because of this that we have a continual connection, one of the most important ways of having a dialogue with the past and with our history. We worry about the natural ecology, and we must, but we really also must worry about the cultural ecology, which is equally endangered. Our corporate culture is grinding and consuming our heritage, eradicating the memory of what we can learn from those who preceded us, all in the name of a short-term goal. Short-term profits destroy these kinds of cultural spaces, irreversibly damaging our heritage. This self-reflexive moment is a critical space constituting itself in political life and playing a role in the production of consciousness itself in culture. Human intention takes on its role as a producer of meaning, along with the subjective responsibility of having done so, and anchors the cultural discourse of which it is a part of to the historical moment in which it happens. Is this which gives art its authenticity, both in the present and for future generations. Today, I would like to discuss some of my most recent public projects, curated installation works, and exhibition projects. An important consideration, one which has made a public challenge, is that public artwork must be accessible to a non-specialized audience, while at the same time providing an enriching cultural contribution as it makes a serious addition to the body of my work. The assignment is a different one from working in a museum, for example, which can presume a certain knowing audience. There is a kind of social contract to working in a space shared by many, and the artist has some responsibility to provide a level of attainable meaning. The task is to do that and not compromise one's problematic as an artist. Slides. One field to the next. It was conceived in 2013, completed in 2015. Is at the Taipei main station in Taipei, Taiwan. This site-specific work, a permanent installation I was commissioned for the new Taipei main station. It is my first public work in Taiwan and was inaugurated with the unveiling of the new MRT system there. For this project, I have made use of the writings of the author Guo Songfen. I chose the text by a modernist who has so accurately expressed the existential plight of being torn between the movement in one's life, beginning from the connection and identity to a home, and the guilt generated by such a departure and his own fear of being abandoned by that same choice. I chose the text from Running Mother, which constitutes an apparently quiet passage, a reflective moment of contemplation provided by the simple experience of the view where one finds oneself. It is the traveler who stops and reflects, who experiences both where they have come from and where they are going, combined in a moment of contemplation about where they are heading. As for my practice, I have formed this work through its relationship to, first, its architectural site, and then to the social location as well, putting into play a text which reflects on the historical and cultural meaning of that same location. Another earlier example of how I use writers in my practice is the permanent work I did in Berlin for the Bundestag, which is the German parliament, there in 2001, titled, What Then Was Life? Here I was interested in the special considerations which can potentially enrich the work as an interface of political meanings uplifted to a level of cultural symbolism. I chose the text by two authors, Ricardo Hoch and Thomas Mann. Both authors seem to me to be the best example of individuals that have made an important contribution to German literature and the writing of history. Hoch, who spent an important part of her professional life in the east of Germany and is also a woman, seemed a good balance to Mann, who considered Hoch the greatest woman of their time. Ricardo Hoch lived many years in East Germany, was an early proponent of feminism, and was the first professor, important professor, to speak out against the firing of her Jewish colleagues who were being removed from German universities in the 1930s. A Monument of Minds, 2015, the Krona Building, Kongsberg, Norway. This is a permanent installation at the Krona Building, housed within the newly opened Krona Cultural and Educational Center in the Kongsberg region of Norway, 1 hour's drive from Oslo. The building also contains workspaces, 3 schools, 3 cinemas, 2 cultural halls, and public and academic libraries. A Monument of Minds connects modern architectural expression with the region's former position as a center of Norwegian silver mining. The installation consists of 136 neon elements with silver leaf installed throughout the building's 6-story atrium, a space expected to be utilized by thousands of people every day. Each neon panel details the name and closure date of the silver mines that were once active in Kongsberg, simultaneously presenting a tribute to the mine and the region's history. The silver mines operated for 300 years, and the money was used by the King of Denmark, who then was controlled Norway, was used to wage war on Europe. Inventing Relations for Carlos Scarpa, 2016, Ca' Foscari University, Venice, Italy. I was invited to present in a group show during the Venice Architectural Biennale in honor of the Venetian architect Carlo Scarpa. The installation work reinterprets Scarpa's own handwriting, statements, and drawings. The work is installed in the Mario Barato Academic Arts Hall at the University of Ca' Foscari, overlooking the Canale Grande, an important space not normally accessible to the public. Scarpa's intervention within the renowned lecture hall on the Piano Nobile, the main floor of the palazzo, became one of the most famous of his works within the city, along with his work at the Fondazione Quinieri Stampaglia. I chose to utilize the large window which overlooks one of the most striking views of the Canale Grande and is incorporated and facing Scarpa's famous Boiseries. I selected a series of quotes both in Italian and English by Scarpa in relation to the room, on his reflection on architecture and art, and juxtaposed these with his own hand drawings related to the same room. The basis for the layout of the quotes from Scarpa, somewhere in my mind, with no particular direction or illustrative purpose, was his use of stones in the garden that he designed in the Palazzo Quinieri Stampaglia in Venice. I was interested in the play of breaking expectations in terms of the forms within a flow. I tried to use the idea of interruption in my work on the window panes of the Scarpa intervention in the Mario Barato lecture hall. A major part of Scarpa's practice was to reinvigorate or to retransform cultural spaces that had been around a long time and that had become, in some ways, naturalized. He reinvested them with a cultural experience, and that is why so much of his work was engaged with transformation of older spaces into modern ones, while keeping intact the spirit of the original architecture. For many artists, architecture is our nature. We work in relation to architecture. I think someone like Scarpa in many ways was an artist. At a certain point, there is no difference between an artist and an architect. I'm always, at least when an architect is good. I'm always amused to recall that when Marcel Duchamp was asked in an interview, what is the difference between sculpture and architecture? He thought a moment and he replied, plumbing. It's interesting. I don't think I've ever used drawing in an installation of mine before, like I have here with Scarpa's hand-lined drawings. I've used artworks by other artists before and have done several large, what I call curated installations. One can appropriate almost anything since it becomes an element in the construction of one's work as an artist. There's a human voice here, a voice of Carlo Scarpa about his own practice. The natural way of how architecture dissolves into naturalism is enhanced by hearing the architect speak of his own work. Whatever surplus meaning is constructed by the relationship between Scarpa, his architectural intervention, and Scarpa, his voice through his statements, somehow I become within the work the author of it, even though it is all Scarpa. This is part of an important aspect of the meaning-making process of being an artist. We work with the detritus of all the production of all those that preceded us, and that is really the beauty of it all. There is no coincidence that my work on the facade of the Fondazione Quinieri Stampaglia uses the theory of ornamentation developed by John Ruskin in his book, The Stones of Venice, and appropriated part of this theory of ornamentation to actually make ornamentation from it. This too is a play between nature and culture, in keeping with the project dedicated to Carlo Scarpa at Ca' Foscari. And while we're still in Venice, this project, it was called The Language of Equilibrium, It was in 2007 at the Venice Biennale on the island of San Lazzaro, which is across from Giardini. This project in yellow neon has as its basis language itself. It is a work which is both a reflection on its own construction as well as on the history and culture of its location. It is comprised of words from the Armenian, Italian, and English language. Language here is used as a signifier of the history of the project of the Macterian order. Yellow neon was chosen for this work because of the symbolic understanding of yellow at the time of the founding of the monastery as meaning virtue, intellect, esteem, and majesty. That was a quote from Buckler of 1688. The two supportive components of the work, based on the word water, are comprised of words arrived at through a view of their history and use. One aspect of this installation shows this relationship. The other part reflects the role of these words in the Hegesian Pararan, or the Armenian Dictionary of 1749, written by Abbot Mekhitar, founder of the order. The structure of this installation has two elements, which are integrated on four diverse architectural locations: the bell tower, the northwest wall, the promontory, and the observatory. These four locations reflect both the diversity of the island's architecture as well as articulate the history and culture of the island. The work reflects the cultural and social history of the evolution of language itself, how the history of a word shows its ties to cultures and social reality quite distinct and disconnected. It is only in the present when a word is used, as it is with a work of art being experienced, that all that which comprises the present finds its location in the process of making meaning. Here, in this work, language becomes both an allegory and an actual result of all of which it would want to speak. WFT San Francisco was worked on between 2016 and 2019. It was commissioned by the San Francisco Arts Commission for a new site-specific artwork on the western facade of the historic Bill Graham Civic Auditorium. The work I conceived for this project is called WFT San Francisco, and it presents the etymology or word family tree of civic and auditorium in white neon. Through the use of language, my work attempts to reflect the historical significance of the auditorium while also demonstrating how words reveal relationships to cultural and social reality. WFT San Francisco is my first permanent public artwork on an historic building in the United States. I consider the role the auditorium has played in San Francisco history, from its inauguration in 1915 as part of the Panama Pacific International Exposition, to hosting psychedelic rock concerts in the 1960s, to the present. The etymological origins of the words provide meaningful and coincidental associations with recent landmark public policy, such as the legalization of gay marriage. The basis of this project is language itself. It is a work that is both a reflection on its own construction as well as on the history and culture of its location. The structure of this installation has two parts: the etymology of the word civic and auditorium in white neon on the western facade. The word civic is integrally connected to the long history of civil rights activism that has taken place and continues to take place in the plaza, from gay rights to Black Lives Matter. The word auditorium, on the other hand, is more specific to the building itself, referring to the collective audience assembled by Bill Graham, who found a way as a concert promoter to not only promote concerts, but also community. Located work, Miami Beach, 2015. completed in 2019. Located World Miami Beach is part of a series of works also made in Europe and Japan that signify a sense of place through the abstraction of quantified meaning and query the impulse of the will to show specifically where we are. In a sense, the work is about how a community defines itself both within and without borders. The work is configured in its geographical relation to the rest of the world. Its specific location determines the size of the lettering of the place names presented in the work, whose graphic configuration is scaled in direct proportion to their distance from this global location. The closer a location is, in this case to Miami Beach, the larger it is graphically. These are some of my previous works in this series. This was the first one, located where it's Singen, from 2000. It's the City Hall of Singen, Germany. The work was conceived of, and this is the first one here. Singen is an ugly little city in Germany. They know it. Everybody who goes there knows it. It is a terrible competitive relationship with a very beautiful city, Constance, not far away. And and when I went there, it became clear to me that the people of the city of Singen had a complex about their city. So I wanted to make them feel proud about it. So I decided I would make a relationship between Singen and the rest of the world. And so I conceived of this project for this purpose, so that they could see the relationship of their own location in the world in relation to the larger world, which is how it came about. Then located world Sapporo. This was the Sapporo Dome. It's from 2001. It was where the World Cup match took place. It was built for that in Sapporo. It's quite an amazing building in which the roof, the ground floor comes and goes. It can go outside so the grass gets sun and then it slides back in. And they do rock concerts, all sorts of things there. It was made for the World Cup. And then located word La Marana, which is my only one in Italy, which is in the Parco d'Arte Ambientale La Marana, which is in Monte Marcello. This is a path, it's a kind of sculpture park, private one. This map of the world, consisting of signposts of cities and towns both arbitrarily chosen and purposefully included, becomes an alternative global network, reordering geopolitical privilege and prominence by flattening all difference to a matter of proximity versus distance. This is itself an unsatisfactory way of making meaning, but one that reveals the constructed nature of our sense of place and belonging, all the more so due to the arbitrary basis of its inclusive procedure. Mappa Mundi, Taiwan. Commissioned for the Still Waters Runs Deep exhibition at the Kosuth Museum of Fine Arts. This is the largest city in the southern half of the Taiwan. It interrogates the objects produced by cartographers and explores the language inherent in map making. I attempt to question the very semantics of localization and how the linguistic need stems not so much from an inquiry into representation, but from a process of production, ultimately the shaping of meaning itself. Mappa Mundi, Taiwan, is comprised of a large site-specific neon installation accompanied by a series of silkscreen panels containing a selection of quotes by various writers, Each text refers to the ontology of cartography and mapping. The neon work is a line drawing, a reproduction of an existing Dutch map dated circa 1638, and I've traced an illuminated perimeter of an old cartography of the south end of the island of Taiwan. While I have often referred directly and indirectly to maps in the process of mapping in previous works, this work represents my first geographical neon map. I previously said concerning the subject of maps. Unlike the maps we have naturalized as part of our contemporary national identity, on the one hand, and our practical use of them on the other, an old map bears the device of its own vision of the world to the picture of it that worldview constructs. It's one we experience as a difference from our present concept of the world, obviously, and thus something visible. There's a kind of linguistic component to maps. Language loses its transparency in an interesting way in an old map. The Law is a public commission for the new Palace of Justice in the city of Salerno, Italy. It's the Salerno Judiciary Building by David Chipperfield, the architect. This is a rendering of a work in progress. Though it's been going on 14 years. When I first won the commission, it was the largest money I was ever awarded for a work. I haven't been paid yet, but it will be one of the smallest by the time I get paid. Life in Italy, right? This is a rendering of a work in progress. The work is a quote in Italian by the philosopher St. Thomas Aquinas. A double layer of metal-shaped letters runs along the 127-meter length of the 6 facades of the building that make up the citadel. I would like to discuss some of my installation work from a general perspective and as a central device of some of my practice. Installations, as a structural or constructive element, can be seen to often be conceived as a kind of stage set, an autonomous one, built to generate the play which follows from it. The play itself, a connecting and disruptive narrative of discourse, of historical and cultural reference, makes formal associations with both art and non-art sources, and contains both social and political meaning within a cultural view, along with the psychological and other associative responses to an architectural setting already internalized as part of the installation. The play arrives with the viewer and is consistent of the approach itself toward what the viewer finds there. The dialogue, as initiated, is provided by this discourse, and it begins as an interior one. The theater of which I speak is one anchored in the world, and as an installation, it has been a liberating platform for practicing artists who established it as their own postmodern zone of play. The actors in this play are without a script, and the viewing audience and the actors are, in fact, one and the same. Neither the fictive nor the properly theatrical are to be found in the program of this artistic enterprise. There is no need for absorption nor a passage to transcendence. There is only a construction within a cultural discourse at a moment of our own history, one having a language that needs to be seen as an interface where meaning in this world is in the process of construction. It is a meaning which shows, constructed in a way which is specific to art, and its assertions are no less significant, philosophically or culturally, for being manifested and implicit. Installations arrived as the result of the need of artists to produce works which were in the world, whether employing objects or not, but which were not framed by the limits imposed by the fictive space requirements of modernist sculpture and painting. Thus, in important ways, installations were also free of the ideological baggage of modernism, particularly given the consequences of the hijacking of late modernism by Greenberg, Fried, and their followers. That their contribution was seen at the time as more than just an intellectual event in academia, or it has since been consigned, really. It remains a curiosity from my generation. One can now see the contribution then was primarily negative, because there emerged no art of any significance which was generated by or had the support and positive influence of this theory. Its role was primarily one of a negative framing and misreading of work such as pop art and minimalism, which in fact has since proven to be both significant and consequential. If by reactionary one means a response intended to maintain the status quo, this certainly defines the efforts of Greenberg, Fried, et al. It was the theoretical shoring up of a form of art that was already beginning to lose its relevance. That was certainly obvious to many of us even then, and is simply a fact now, some 50 years later. The lesson here is about the power of art to define its own self-conception within the practice itself as it participates in shaping the culture of its time. What it also reveals is the limited value and effect of any theory without the anchor of an actual artistic practice accompanying it, supporting it. The system of belief which accompanies and shapes the view of an object intended as art as being not simply an object, but as a construction, was for me exactly where the rupture needed to take place. And it was the location where a practice concerned with why found itself with a mission that felt at the time like historical necessity. And it should be said that even if still modernist in many ways at the time, minimalism nonetheless was important for making a break which showed the way out of that swamp of meaning which sculpture and painting increasingly represented. This was long before the market turned minimal art back into sculpture for its own purpose. The view from the balcony now is a view which includes both modernism and postmodernism, and the terrain we see is one built over the past 30 or 40 years and resulting in another culture with other expectations and a different mission. If John showed us how a canvas wasn't a window into another space, installation constituted a leap and a break. They are already in the world we inhabit, and the effect they have is meant to happen there. The questions our works became free to ask are a result of us, as artists, finding ourselves there. The work which this has initiated in the past decade has shown that playing field to be a fertile one, as has the theory also initiated by institutional critique, which in its various forms has benefited most significantly. It is actual works upon which art theory must be anchored, and without the discourse begun by conceptual art's earliest works, such a conversation couldn't be taking place. It is no accident that my first major show at Leo Castelli Gallery in 1971, after my previous smaller one there of the second investigation in 1969, was the eighth investigation, now in the Panza collection. It was comprised of a large table, 12 chairs, 24 wall clocks, 12 notebooks, filled with appropriated texts taken from various authors on function, tautology, and time. The viewer-reader, as I called the audience for this work at the time, was expected to sit down and read, and to make the connections within a field of contingency of meaning that the order of the clocks facilitated. Whatever absorption this work required was in the reading of the text, and the fictive space requirements of convention and modernity died right there. On the wall and in the notebooks was a chart and mode d'emploi, which ended with my declaration of the work as postmodern. This was 1971, and it was on the same wall in the same room that Jasper Johns' first flag painting was shown some years before. Even without any intention to self-historicize, one still might pause to say that there is a history and mission to the practice of which I speak, and it's important to know it fully to understand that aspect of postmodernism which installation work constitutes and which emerged in the following decade. The material of an installation is, first, a psychological and social experience provided by the room's architecture. The results from the meaning of the social and cultural history of its use, along with the combined experience of the psychology of that particular architectural context, added to our prior architectural experience. We know and experience that while we also know we are standing in the world. We also know in a museum or gallery that, like anything else, its being there could be of limited duration, but we suspect that understanding. The world as that location, that institution or place of cultural activity will change and continue in another way. This location in time provides temporary installations, that texture of history, which is part of one's more immediate experience of them. There are other aspects to permanent installations which make them valuable in another way, but to understand both better, we must begin with the temporary. The point is that an installation work, even a temporary one, insofar as the experience of the work goes, is attached to a location. It's fixed as part of the architecture and seals its fate along with the history and culture of that one location in the world. The implication being quite unlike the free-floating object that transcends any particular place, finding its aura in the market on its way to the final resting place of the heavenly museum. It is the loss of the sense of self with absorption which removes the viewer from the here and now and makes the experience of a fictive space even possible. Why installations are so intrinsically linked with this understanding of postmodernism is that their commitment to a location links them to the here and now and is yet discursively part of what makes them art. As such, as art, they can do so while they remain in the world. One cannot hope to prescribe work having an engagement with questions concerning the production of meaning to always turn out results that are either well-designed and aesthetically pleasing, along the lines of long-received criteria of attraction and market desirability. Nor, with any more or less likelihood, should we expect a rigorous and prescriptive form of public uncanniness, of demonstrating an ugly or non-art gravitas to be part of that experience either. Such an insistence ultimately functions as a form of style. How one makes a work must be in the service of why it is being made. To that end, a work can look like anything at all, including not necessarily being visible at all. Beyond the signifying needs inherent in how the work must manifest itself and what is required for it to construct the meaning that it does, how it looks like doesn't really matter beyond its role in that requirement. We do know that historically new art, when it is making a contribution to the history of ideas, often doesn't look like art. Driven primarily by artistic intention, such work, if judgment is the issue, must be judged by its own standards, those standards required for the work's reception which permit it to be put into play culturally. The viewer-reader must also be armed, apparently, with the admonition that seeing isn't as simple as looking. The eighth investigation work was also shown in Naples during the same year, the first show of Leah Ruma, following Leah Ruma's invitation to exhibit in her first gallery show. The installation represented the beginning of a long collaboration. The most recent exhibition that just opened a few days ago at Lea Roma's Milan Gallery centers around Samuel Beckett's concept and use of existential time, while also including different source material from various thinkers. The reflection on time in this exhibition stems from both a personal and philosophical concern with finding meaning within the various contexts life provides. It is also an investigation into the process of meaning-making in artistic practice. Through this process, I have attempted to remove the necessity of embracing an objective, shared truth while experiencing a work. I was interested in investigating the freedom, choice, and responsibility inherent in everyday experience, as well as artistic practice in general. The installation as a whole is a reflection on the gap that holds together beginnings and ends. Existential time endeavors to punctuate the lack, limits, and surplus of meaning surrounding the experience of time and life, while exploring the powerful and finite territory of the present. This show can be viewed as a second chapter and possibly a departure from a previous exhibition I did at the same gallery in 2010 titled Text for Nothing, Samuel Beckett in Play. Now, a word about Beckett. Abandoned for years by the major critics of Beckett's work and rarely included anthologies of his writing, Texts for Nothing was seen as outside of the mainstream of Beckett's writing. Previously viewed as somewhat of a pause in the oeuvre of Beckett, for me, as an artist approaching his work, this writing, for my purposes, is quintessential Beckett, the perfect example of his particular artistic integrity. Beckett's project as an artist has been instructive to me and touches on questions which occupy my own work, that is, a concern with meaning. One of many differences, of course, is that Beckett approaches the question of meaning from its absence. And in my work, I have concern with how meaning is made. But that said, the approach can neither be obvious nor singular. Text for Nothing is the least narrative piece of all of Beckett's writing and has been most useful to me. To manifest descriptions from the parts unsaid, a particular characteristic of Beckett, is to underscore that this work, and that is also my work, waits for the viewer-reader. That is, it is a process, and it is incomplete. It is work which only begins, it does not end. In the case of Waiting for Godot, it has been described as a drama concerned with the collapse of language, belief, and ultimately meaning. By doing so, Beckett bears the device of all other theatrical projects, before and after. The how of traditional, even modern theater pales, even becomes meaningless in the face of the why that is revealed as quite possibly unsupportable. Not unlike the philosophical project of Ludwig Wittgenstein or the artistic project of Ad Reinhardt, saying what's not possible may be the only approach to showing what is. The project is to glimpse in passing what it would be like to believe and where meaning may be found. For this exhibition, the installation was comprised of text written in warm white neon and partially blacked out on the front surface, appropriated passages from the dialogue of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, put in play in relation to his lesser-known writing, Text for Nothing, together with an illuminated image is that of Caspar David Friedrich's painting, Two Men Looking at the Moon, 1819, which is considered to be the painting that inspired Beckett to write Waiting for Godot. That one. Curated installation. Dot, point, period. It was a curated installation recently, earlier this year, 2019. It opened on April 4th and it closed July 20th. Since the 1960s, I have used the curated installation as a key conceptual aesthetic strategy for exploring questions of authorship and the basic nature of art. Dot, point, period was the first time such an installation has been displayed in New York City since the Brooklyn Museum collection, the play of the Unmentionable, was exhibited at the Brooklyn Museum in 1990. Dot, point, period focuses on the dot or period as a graphic form that marks out a visual space, and in so doing defines meaning in both written language and art. By punctuating intervals that delimit thoughts and also indicate moments of rest, pauses for the intake of breath. The period indexes the cadence of oral speech within text. Similarly, in art, the dot, fragment, or stroke registers visual continuities and ruptures that establish significant relationships between constituent elements of an image. In this respect, the dot form functions as a useful aid for shaping and coding meaning in both visual and verbal mediums. Yet its rules are not essentially fixed in either. When considered independently from the structure of grammar, syntax, or composition, the dot's semantic value remains indeterminate, awaiting the contextualizing framework of a given text or image. Consequently, the dot's significance derives from its use, determined by convention and repetition, by what is built through and around it. The dot registers the influence of context in determining the significance of its constituent forms. Conclusion. Others have asked, is work such as yours is it visual, and are you concerned whether it is beautiful? And I confess, I cannot distinguish between visual and conceptual when the knowledge of a work's elements and its internal play is acquired visually. A concept must be communicated to be known. In fact, eliminate the legacy of formalism and the question becomes nonsense. The reading of the text and understanding of the play between them and the architecture is all visual. In any case, I certainly accept as a potential given all of the meanings and experiences which the work generates, including both beautiful or ugly. However, I think to understand the work in terms of it having a history and a context is to comprehend the very limited role traditional aesthetic reception has to this work's deeper meanings. In other words, the extent of the role of traditional aesthetics in the play of the work is provided by the viewer-reader, and providing that by them probably risks blocking their complete appreciation of the work. Still, aesthetic responses to one's experiences, whatever they are hard to control or deny. One can, however, more easily control the desire to theorize about those responses. I think of the comment of Roland Barthes, quote, "A text is not a line of words releasing a single theological meaning, but a multidimensional space in which a variety of writing, none of them original, blend and clash. The text is a tissue of quotations drawn from the innumerable centers of culture." To make a work which plays with history is, of course, to acknowledge that such a work is a play on the postponement of meaning. It is a play of delay. All you can see of my contribution is a view of the artistic process itself. For when meaning is the material of one's work, it remains a gap, something between the lines. It is, however, through that gap that art sees the world and then changes it.